We're recording the interview of Jeffrey King. The interview is being conducted by Adrian Hill from the Wright State University Veteran Voices Project. The interview is being recorded at Wright State University Veteran and Military Center in Dayton, Ohio. It is 2 p.m. on February 11, 2014. All right, Jeffrey. When and where were you born?
I was born in Bellefontaine, Ohio, March 9th, 1969.
Okay. Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My father is Thomas King. He was, or was, a machines tradesman. He was machine repair for Rockwell Corporation. And my mother was Barbara King, and she was a homemaker, stayed home.
Okay. So did you have any siblings?
I did.
How many?
I do. I have a brother and 2 sisters.
Okay. Did any of them serve in the military?
No, they did not.
No? Okay, so you're the only one out of your immediate family that's
Immediate family, yes.
Okay, parents didn't.
My father went. He was drafted, I guess, in the Air Force, but had medical issues that precluded him from service, so they sent him home.
Okay.
But he tried.
Yeah. Okay. So what were you doing before you entered the service?
Immediately before the service, I worked in an automotive repair shop, just working on cars. So, and I did some heating and air conditioning work for a local business too. So that was the extent of my pre-military career.
Okay. And you chose what branch?
Air Force.
And why the Air Force?
At the time, it was the quickest way to leave. I wanted to go in the military, and I made a decision. I chose the Air Force over everything else, basically because they, at the time, being 18 years old, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, that's what the opportunity came up and I left. So they were the quickest one to get me to leave.
And you enlisted?
I did.
In what year?
1987.
1987. Okay. So going in 87, Cold War was still kind of
Yes.
there. Was that in the back of your mind or anything when you joined?
No, not at all. I was from a small community with very limited application to the world, if you will. Small, back then media wasn't like it is today, so my knowledge of the military was very, just. I had a cousin, or a second cousin that was the Air Force, and then my uncle, I had a great uncle that was in the Air Force, but other than that, I didn't know much about it, and the Cold War was not even a thought at the time.
Oh, okay. Just kind of going in blind, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. Just not knowing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Going to go to college, but it didn't happen at the time, so joined the military to do it. So.
Okay. So can you describe maybe leaving for basic, what was kind of going through your mind or anything like that?
Leaving for basic was intimidating at first, but also exciting. I was, I was always prided myself as being fairly independent. When I turned 18, even before graduating high school, I moved out on my own to live. I didn't want to be a burden to my parents type, thing. I was always been kind of prideful with that. So as soon as I turned 18, I moved out in March of 87 and went out there, and that's what I was always excited to move on to new chapters and try new things. So when I went to basic training, I was very excited. I was somewhat intimidated, but I didn't look at it as being hard. So that's what I was really it's just the unknown, somewhat intimidating. But at the time, I wasn't that worried about it. So
right. Okay. What about when you got to basic?
When I got to basic, obviously. The psychological portion that they try to do to you at typical basic training back, almost 28 years ago was different to nowadays, I would assume, but driving around on a bus for a long time, but you start realizing they're just driving you in circles. I mean, it seemed like at the time you were on the base after leaving the airport, I knew when we came to the base, they literally, I think, on purpose drove us around in circles to try to confuse you where you're at and what you're doing type of a thing. But when they get off the bus, typical yelling at you, trying to break you down and pick the bags up, put the bags down, picking on all the guys that had short haircuts already or having the duffel bags with their brother's name on it. And I pretty much stayed quiet and just did what I was told, and at that time didn't have any issues. So it's but so far, at that time, it wasn't that bad yet. So
yeah. Where'd you go to basic?
Lackland Air Force Base in Texas,
okay.
San Antonio.
Yeah. Should you fly from Dayton down there? Or?
I did, or Columbus. It was actually Columbus. We left out of the MEPS station, put us up in a hotel, they processed out of the MEPS, got on a bus to the airport to Columbus, ticket in hand. I think we changed planes in St. Louis and landed in San Antonio.
Okay.
September 19th, 1987.
Okay. Well, I'd never forget it, huh?
No.
Much as you'd like to.
It wasn't that bad at the time, so.
Okay, so can you talk about basic training a little bit? Maybe adjusting. How did you adjust to the physical, mental, the food, everything?
Well, physically at the time, it wasn't as intimidating as I'd expected. The Air Force, you know, the physical fitness criteria at the time for basic training was not that bad. So that I was very fortunate to. I mean, I may not look it now, but at the time I was, you know, fresh out of high school playing, you know, sports and things. So it was fairly decent. I was 155 pounds then, and fairly athletic, I thought. So it wasn't that challenging. Really, just running was the extent of anything calisthenics-wise. It was very simple, very basic stuff. So physically, it wasn't an issue at all. So.
How about you know, I know you talked a little bit about the psychological aspect of it, but was that hard for you to adjust to that?
It was not. My problem was not so much as the adjustment. Like I said, I've never been a person to. I don't know if I'm cold or what, but I didn't really miss people that much, you know. So I was more excited about the change. That kind of, you know, I was more excited for that. It kind of overcame the thought of being missing somebody, I guess. I just knew, you know, a couple of months I'm going to see everybody, so it's not that big of a deal to me. But the psychological aspect of the biggest problem was dealing with other people that was there. There was a lot of people. Just at the time, for me, I was like struggling with the fact like these people seem miserable, and I'm like, this isn't this bad. What am I? If am I not doing something right or not paying attention enough to make it as bad as it should be? But at the time, there's, you know, people. But that was my first real application to understanding the dynamics in different people and personalities and how people do things differently. So
yeah,
but that's what the biggest thing was in basic, because other people,
right, getting along with everybody,
getting along with other people, and just watching the stress levels from them. Because the stress for me was not the training or the basic training. That was challenging but exciting for me. It was fun. But then just to see everybody else struggling with not being with their families, but some of them were different because I, you know, didn't have a wife or kids or anything like that. Some did, so I guess that was some of it. So.
Okay. Do you recall any of your instructors from basic? Yep.
Tech Sergeant Aguero. I cannot remember his first name. And then there was a Staff Sergeant Bernard Duckett. Still remember him. And those were my two primary instructors from then, basic training. Still remember them to this day.
Do you have any, like, you know, specific instances you think of when you think of them, or?
Yes, Sergeant Aguero. I remember writing. It's weird, but we had to do linen exchange, and there was no military vehicle available. And Sergeant Aguero made myself and another individual gather up all the linens because we were on that linen detail that day, and we put it in the trunk of his car and rode in the back seat of his car to linen exchange and listen to music. And it was like a change because you haven't heard music. We didn't have music or anything, but he was listening to a local radio station in San Antonio, which he was of Hispanic descent, so he was listening to a Hispanic channel. So it was just interesting. And me being from a small town, I never heard that before, so I thought that was just neat. And that was him. And then for Sergeant Duckett, I always remember him as he was a consummate professional. Just he was always perfect. I mean, his uniform. When he walked, he was always from a military bearing standpoint, it was like what you wanted to try to be. So very stern. I just remember mail call, he could, back then, you know, no emails or nothing, but he could flip an envelope. You know, that was his thing. He loved flipping envelopes toward people. So that's what I remember of him.
Okay. So you get done with basic, and then where do you go?
I got done with basic training, and I moved approximately 3/4 of a mile to the other side of the base to the United States Air Force. Back then it was called Security Police Academy. So nowadays it's called Security Forces. So I went to the Lackland Air Force Base to the other side to the Air Force Security Police Academy.
And what was your training like for that?
Training for that was a lot more in depth. Back in then, the Air Force was split up into 3 different career fields: combat arms, law enforcement, and security specialist. I went the security specialist route. And security specialist primary focus was on, it was almost typically like an infantry type thing from the Army. And matter of fact, after that training at Air Force Base, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey for advanced infantry training through the Army. So, but their training there for that was typically every morning PT, a lot more in depth, obviously, than previously in basic training, but because it was more specialized at that point, a lot more running, a lot more PT with your gear, weapons, stuff like that all the time, and just learning how to squad tactics, movements, just basic security functions, guarding aircraft, nuclear weapon system security, how to guard, how to weapon storage areas for nuclear weapons. We learned security for those, convoy procedures while driving in convoys, armored vehicles, just teamwork for providing security, for working in fire teams and squads and that type of an environment. We learned all that, and then handcuffing, searching, because of the law enforcement aspects were part of it too. So because you had to apprehend or detain somebody that walked into a restricted area or something like that, you had to learn how to respond to that. So
yeah. Okay. How long were you there for that?
That portion of it was 7 or 8 weeks.
Okay. And then what? And
then from there we went to Fort Dix, New Jersey for a little over a month, 5 weeks I think, for what they call the Air Base Defense course, or it's advanced infantry training course. Back then it was called Air Base Ground Defense. So basically that was actually just infantry school. So basically, just learning how to be 11 Bravo, as they call it. So.
Right.
But that was the Air Force we had, because that's what the Air Force does during a wartime environment. The Air Force security forces are the actual infantry, if you will. So we do the same things as 11 Bravo typically, or a military police / infantry for the Air Force.
Okay. What was your number designation for that? I don't know, with MOS or tech number.
Back then it was 81150 or 811XO for them, but when I retired, they transitioned the Air Force, as they call the Air Force Specialty Code, was a 3PO X1.
Oh, okay.
So 3PO that's the identifier for security forces.
Gotcha. Okay, so after that month at Dix, then what?
Then I went off to Malmstrom Air Force Base in Great Falls, Montana.
Okay.
To work nuclear weapons system security.
Okay. So you just did pretty much pulled security on?
Yep, I did convoys. We did convoy security for airframes for the missiles and the nuclear warheads themselves. But when the nuclear warheads traveled, obviously you always had to have what they call a 15-minute or a 15-man response within 5 minutes. Or with those, you also had convoy people right with it. So you always had security personnel armed. Peacekeepers, they called them. They were kind of like a armored vehicle years ago that we would travel. And then also had a helicopter with a Mark 19 grenade launcher in it to provide cover in case it was attacked. So.
Okay. So how old were you at this time then? You're 20?
19.
19, 20? So what was that like? Maybe you probably didn't really understand the full...
No, I didn't. The breadth of it at the time. Even at the time, it was during the, obviously I came in when Ronald Reagan was still president, and George Bush the first, 41, came into office, and then he actually did there was a treaty going on at the time. I can't remember if it was START, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, but we were actually, we had Soviet military officers come to our base to inspect missile silos and do those types of things. So I was present for one of the nuclear officers for the Soviet Union back then. Was really weird to see a Soviet officer standing on a United States Air Force missile site. So,
yeah. Especially at the time.
At the time, and that nowadays you look back and that's not a big deal, but that was part of the treaties. We got to go inspect each other's places, and they came to our base, and I happened to be a part of that. Not that I was right there, but I was on that site when it happened, so it was interesting to see. So
were there any precautions that they had you guys take as security forces for that, or?
Absolutely, we did a little extra training. They handpicked quite a few people that were a little bit more level-headed, I guess, that hadn't been in any trouble or something. So at the time I was young enough to not know how to get in trouble, so that's probably why I was helped got into the security team to be on that. So,
Yeah.
but that's typically we just did some rules of engagement type thing, just like don't talk to them, don't look at them, just try to be there, but don't, kind of let the military officer and the attaché people that are all Department of State people are all there, They pretty much just had to deal with them. We just kind of stood off in the background and blended on the site, so.
Okay, so how long were you there for?
I was at Malmstrom Air Force Base for 3 years. Then I went to Korea for a year. Then came back to Malmstrom again. So I was at Malmstrom a total of almost 7 years.
Okay. Now, where were you when it was kind of announced that maybe the Berlin Wall fell, or that the Soviet the kind of regime there had fallen?
I don't recall where I was. Can't even remember when it happened. But I do know I was working. It was in 1990. Right about October of 1990, when President Bush put an order to safe all the nuclear missiles. We had to basically put them on safe mode as a part of a strategic partnership thing with the Soviet Union or whatever it was at the time. I was working at a place called the Keys and Codes Control Center at that point, and we processed all the classified material to go out in the missile field to have access to the nuclear weapons and such. The office I worked in at the time, I had an office job by that for a while, and I was on working. It was a weekend, and we got a message to literally within 24 hours we had to send security and maintenance teams out to all the missile sites. And the amount of time in Montana, the Great Falls, there was 200 of them. We had 23,000 square miles of missile field, and within 24 hours we had to have all the missiles safed. So they recalled all the maintenance personnel, all the security personnel to go out to basically access and penetrate all the sites to go downstairs and do something. I have no idea from the technical standpoint what that meant, but I did know that the processes, I think if I can say what I can say, but the processes to put people out there on those fields, there was a process in place, and that I was part of the processing and classified stuff to do that stuff. So it was, the dispatches to get people out to do those things. So it was interesting to say the least. So
yeah, definitely. Okay, so what about after? So you go to Korea for a year.
Korea for a year.
Anything of note there, or?
Got to go work with I can't remember the name of the operation. They do it every year. It's not Team Spirit. It's a big it's mainly for the Air Force and a couple other people, but big joint exercise. But got to participate in that. I was a heavy weapons instructor while I was assigned over there. Worked for the Combat Arms Section, so I was a primary instructor on the 50 caliber machine gun Mark 19, and then I helped with the mortar, the 81 millimeter mortar. I did the fire direction control training for that. Taught people how to calculate and use the M16 plotting board, they call it, how to calculate grid, 8 to 10 digit grids into azimuths, into mils, so we can send out fire missions for the mortars. So I did that as well for most of the time. I worked some security while I was there, but once they found I had what they call an SEI, so a special identifier for heavy weapons, I got kicked over to the Combat Arms Section to help with them train. So
okay. So then you said you came back, and then
came back to Montana for a year, for almost 2 years. Then I separated, got out, not sure what I wanted to do with my life, so I moved back to Ohio. Spent 2 years in the Army National Guard. So whereas sometime I served as a recruiter for a little bit with the Army Guard, then transitioned right back into the Air Force National Guard over in Springfield.
Okay.
And then within less than a year I became active duty again with the Guard, so I was active duty again at that point. So
how long of a break was that for between active duty times?
Close to 93 years. I was a reserve. They say I was a reservist for about 3 years.
So why did you pick Army in there at all?
Because there was no Air Force available, and my Air Force AFSC, the specialty code, I didn't have to go back to training. I was already qualified. I could go right in the Army because I already had the MOS compared to the Army because I'd been through their schools.
Oh, okay. Okay. So then you get back into active duty. Then where do you go?
I was at Springfield Air National Guard Base, but from there I went TDY a lot. different assignments. So
So you were AGR then?
I was AGR.
Okay.
Yes, I was active Guard and Reserve. So as an AGR, I did Title 10 stints, many different places, and plus, obviously, pre 9/11, didn't do too much other than just work base security. I deployed to United Arab Emirates once overseas for Operation, I think it was Operation Northern Watch or Southern Watch. I think it was Northern Watch. We went over. That was still, still watching Iraq from basically the first Gulf War. We deployed United Arab Emirates for a while. A couple little deployments here and there, doing different things, but mainly just worked base security and trained. Did a lot of training. I was the unit deployment manager. I was a training manager for a while during those times as well. So part of the organization.
Okay, so can you maybe talk about how many deployments did you do after you got back in? So we got back on active. You did
Actual
your AGR.
deployments overseas, I did, I think, 5.
And they were at the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
Where else?
Iraq.
All the other ones were Iraq.
Yeah, and other places, but some of the missions were, I don't know what status of them at this time.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I mean, it wasn't nothing important, but it just wasn't, I really don't remember if I could.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. I understand. How long were your deployments to Iraq?
The one deployment in 2006, I think we were in country for 204 days, but we had pre-deployment training prior to that at Creech Air Force Base, what they call the Desert Warfare Training Center. So front to back, it was about close to 8 months, I think, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And then the second deployment, I was at pre-deployment training. That time was at Fort Bliss, Texas, down in El Paso. So we did training there for almost, I think, 4 weeks maybe before we went, and then just a little over 6 months. So left in January 2nd, got back August 3rd.
Of what year?
2011.
Okay. And then
2011. Yeah.
Okay. And then that was it?
That was it. That was my last one for Iraq. But,
okay. Can you is there any kind of details or anything that you could talk about that you did in either of your deployments? Like, what was your main job?
My first deployment to Iraq was in 2006. I was the assistant flight sergeant for what they called Gator Sector. Was responsible for the perimeter of what they call FOB Warrior, Forward Operating Base Warrior. We basically protected the Army. They didn't like it, but the Air Force was in charge of security for the installation. So it was a joint base with Iraqis, United States Army, and United States Air Force. It was a regional air base as well, with Army air assets and Air Force installation. There was no actual Air Force assets assigned, but it was all Army, but we provided the security for the infrastructure. Our sector was responsible for a lot of perimeter, mobile patrols, kind of footprint outside with a little bit what they call a little bit of SAM and IDF footprint. SAM being surface to air missiles and IDF being indirect fire. We basically just did presence patrols to deter anybody for setting up stuff or trying to fire just outside the perimeter. 2 gates. We had a coalition gate where just coalition forces come in and out. We provided security for that and escorting people in and off the installation to going off base for patrols and stuff like that. And then we had another commercial gate where anybody that came onto the base used that. So personnel searches, rapid scans, electronic monitoring for people, X-ray body things. They have, all the controversy they're having in airports right now. We were using those, almost 10 years ago over in Iraq for when people come on the bases. So basically all that was responsible for sectors. I had approximately, I don't know, we had like 60, 70 people working the time that I was worked with, and but just multiple things: patrols, static patrols, posts, overwatches, the pits, search pits. The MVAC was part of our responsibility too, which is called a mobile vehicle and cargo inspection system. It was essentially a big truck with a big arm across, had a cobalt head in it for radiation that basically scanned vehicles, gave you an X-ray scan of any vehicle that came on and off the base. So we had a section that we were responsible for that, those people doing that as well. But a little bit of everything: patrols and responses and escorts and go on and on and on, all kinds of different things.
The same thing with your other Iraq deployment?
No, that was a little bit different.
What was that one like?
That one actually was still base security, but we were also responsible for even though we were on base on Sather Air Base, it was part of the Victory Base Complex, Camp Victory. So basically we'd have to leave our base, and we did mobile patrols. We patrolled the Baghdad International Airport perimeter, essentially. We had an open perimeter, technically, because the airfield for the Air Force and the International Airport at that time would become operational again for civilians. So the civilians had it. So the Iraqi Aviation Authority, IAA, and they contracted with another agency that provides security. So it was all rough at times because there's no fences, nothing. It was just us, and that was, we were the deterrent. So we had mobile patrols, different types of all kinds of gun trucks and hardened Humvees and a few things. I did a few off-base convoys. You know, I remember one time I was a convoy leader for taking logistics people over to help the Iraqis load some things to ship back to Canada to get their air conditioning. I guess, I don't know, it had something to do with the infrastructure for their civil infrastructure. We did a few things like that. But there I was the actual flight sergeant for that day, but I was a little bit more people, plus I had international forces I was responsible for. We had a lot of, I think, where were they from? What country? It was an African country. I'm drawing a blank. But they worked for a private security agency, but they were assigned to us. It was kind of really weird, but they were Ugandan. They were all from Uganda. So we had a bunch of Ugandan forces that they were civilian. They were military, but they were assigned to a civilian government. It was a weird program. I'm not sure how it happened, but they were all private security, if you will. But most of them were Ugandan soldiers working for this agency. So, and but I had, oh man, probably 30, 40 of them working for me there.
How was that? Did you have trouble with that?
No, actually we did not. We actually worked very well with them. We had a great working relationship. They were great people.
Do they speak English?
Yes, very well. They all spoke English very well. So actually I think I understood some of them more than our people. So it was unique there. Very unique, because we had another Iraqi air base too. Within that, the Iraqis had C-130s and some other aircraft, some C-12s and different types of things that we were all integrated with. We also were responsible for training the Iraqi. I don't know how proud we are about it right now, but one of our responsibilities, and some of the people we were with from my base, we helped train the Iraqi security forces, taught them how to shoot and be, kind of security, if you will, security forces for the Iraqis. We trained quite a few of them. I didn't do as much as a lot of other people, but I'd integrate just once in a while just to see it. Went over to watch them at the firing range, things of that nature, because my job was constantly supervising the day-to-day operations of security for the installation at Sather. So,
what rank were you in on your last deployment?
Master Sergeant.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you had a lot of kind of supervising role then? Yeah,
a lot of supervisor. I was a Master Sergeant. I just put Master Sergeant on one August. I put Master Sergeant on 3 days before I deployed to Iraq the first time. So I put Master Sergeant on in 2006. So I wore it, and then same thing, I was Master Sergeant when I went to Iraq the second time as well. So
okay. Okay. So while you were overseas, did you ever witness any combat or anything like that?
Yes.
What kind?
Sniper fire, IEDs, most notably September 28th, 2006. It was probably one of the worst ones I was involved with. So, 750 pounds of explosives in a vehicle rolled up on a convoy. They detonated it. We had two convoys, one coming in, one going out. It blew up, a bunch of Iraqi police killed. So just it's chaos ensued, because most of the Army personnel were not, their mentality wasn't, one of them are like, just getting back to base. Another one is, we're leaving base. And then, we're sitting there with them trying to help coordinate, get everything out and moving things and doing stuff, and it blows, and nobody was prepared. So we're directing, and I just, people just didn't know what to do. I mean, I ended up transporting wounded myself, doing triage, separating bodies, people, doing things. Just, I remember grabbing an Army doctor when he got on scene, and he was in shock, didn't know what to do, just trying to directing them what to do, and just transporting wounded on the Humvees. I literally rode on top of a Humvee all the way back to the hospital, So I remember one time 'cause we had so many people packed in it, wounded. So it was one time, and then just random sniper fire. Different situations. We had a little village off base one time. We was driving out in there, and there's just slow celebratory fire, things of that nature during weddings and things of that nature, just dealing with different people. And so mortar attacks, one time, literally, I think the only reason we survived it was because most mortars, when they blow up, they blow out. We were fortunate to be close enough when it exploded. A lot of it blew over us and past us. Although that's when I got hurt then, but that was because I had two 250-pound guys dive in the same bunker I did and smash me. So I don't consider that a combat, even though it's an injury. It hurts me to this day most of the time, but I don't consider that bad. So, and then it was another time, 107 millimeter rocket. I think it was 107. That landed real close to our Humvee, blew it. I remember the back wheels coming up. I was riding it, hit my head in the ceiling. Didn't know it at the time, but I did get hurt to my knowledge. I mean, I didn't think I was, but found out later I bulged a bunch of discs in my neck. Didn't realize it till years later.
Yeah.
So, but just little things like that. Those were those, and then that was in between 06 and 07. There was a lot more. Back then, there was a lot more hostilities in northern Iraq then. So, but
how did that maybe specifically that instance where you're hauling bodies back and stuff? How did that kind of witnessing that and being part of that? Has it affected you in any way or no? Okay.
Nope. I don't understand why.
Okay.
Like I said, I know friends. I have people that were involved in the same situation that has affected differently.
Right.
I don't know what it is about me. Maybe, like I said, I don't know why, but I'm able to turn things on and off pretty easy. Does it affect me? Yes, it does. Do I think about it all the time? No, I don't. I can compartmentalize fairly good, I guess. I'm not sure, but there's been times, many times, just when dealing. I mean, that was second tour was even different, more different, affected me worse because of the part of our jobs was what we call pitch out response, dust offs. One of our primary duties were to go off base and go as soon as Army wounded or Marine, Navy, whoever, or Air Force. It didn't matter. Any wounded that was coming back to the base, it was one of our jobs to make sure that we expedited their entry. We went out and escorted them on. We picked up the base, essentially brought the wounded back to the CASH, or the Combat Surgical Hospital on Sather Air Base. It was the only level 1 trauma facility left in Iraq at the time, because we were shutting the bases, shutting down, leaving the country. So all the critical wounded came to our base. So it was our job to make sure they got expedited to, so we shut highway roads down, went off base, rammed cars we had to, moving people out of the way to get soldiers and sailors or airmen, Marines, whoever was wounded, back on, to Sather, from around the Victory Base complex. So most times they come in, most times the best case scenario is always when they were choppered in, because we didn't do nothing other than shut down the air flight line, block vehicles. We had choke points. We'd set up block traffic, so no vehicle traffic on the flight line, and we basically go out and expedite the wounded back to the hospital, because they had usually it was a Gator, a little small UTV, John Deere Gator. They had one set up specifically for transporting wounded from the helicopter to the hospital, so that was a couple 100 yards.
Okay. So what kind of stuff did you do for, recreation while you're on deployments?
Legally? Believe it or not, I am not a video gamer, but for some reason in 2006 and 7, we lived in these things called mods. They were modular rooms. They were like big long buildings with about 16 rooms, I think. And we basically ran cable from one room to another, and we linked a bunch of Xboxes together. So we played, what the heck's that game's name? Halo. We played Halo between all these bunch of guys. That was like the biggest recreation. Played football. We had a push-up club, we called it Gator Push-Up, there was a guy from New Hampshire National Guard named Donnie Mulliken, who was 40-some, almost 50 years old, and when 9/11 happened, he was a former Marine back in the 70s. He was, and he had a lot of stories. He was on a Marine Force recon team. He was actually with the Marines going into Iran to rescue hostages back in the 79, I think, and when the plane crashed. He was with them, got out. After 9/11, felt compelled to get back to the military, and the guy was almost 50 years old, but he's literally was like Mr. New Hampshire, bodybuilder type guy. He started a push-up club, and that was one of the entertaining things we did, to see how many push-ups we could do. So we had a bunch of people in the 10,000, 20,000 push-up club, and then back in 2006 and 2007, New Year's Eve, we had a push-up-a-thon where we did push-ups for 24 hours. Started at midnight on the 31st and went all the way we broke in the new year doing push-ups. And I don't remember how many thousands of push-ups were done, but Donnie Mulliken himself did like literally 24,000 push-ups in just 24 hours. I don't know what it was, but the exact number. I have an article about it, but we raised a lot of money for the Security Police Fund and the Security Police Foundation and all this stuff. And then another member who we deployed with, who halfway through the deployment, his son had cancer, they found out. So we raised a bunch of money and donated it back to them over there. So did a lot of those things, chased wildlife. There was mongoose everywhere, so I took a lot of pictures too, so I did a lot of picture taking, so that was like kind of my thing. So, but also being a flight sergeant, I was always involved in everybody else's business, so, dealing with other people's crises and problems and stuff, so I didn't have a lot of time off. But,
yeah. Okay. What about keeping in touch with family?
First time was a little more difficult because of technology, but just telephone calls, morale calls, a couple times a week. Email, get email all the time when I was at work. I was actually one of the very fortunate ones, being a supervisory position. I'd had access to the computer a lot more. So, but the second time in Iraq, 2011, was Skype. I even had a Magic Jack, literally a phone in my room. Plus I had two phones. I had my work phone. I had a work phone in there, an actual phone line, DSN line, and I also had my Magic Jack hooked to my computer. So communication was excellent, just like being somewhere else in the States.
Okay. Could you describe what the morale call was?
Morale call was you got a certain amount of minutes per week to access to a DSN line that you get an access code to be able to dial out. So. They give you so many minutes, and then we have phone cards were given to us by everybody by phone cards. Now, if you had one of those, then it was a lot easier, because then you could just dial a different number and go out into the international phone lines, and you'd hit AT&T and dial all the different access numbers to get back home, to call home with those cards, calling cards. So a lot of veteran organizations, different people would donate them. So we had quite a few of them. Yeah. But typically a morale call, though, was an actual number where you'd call a DSN operator, and they'd transfer you back to Wright-Patterson, and then they would dial you to they would transfer you out to a local number for 15 minutes.
Right.
So that's typically what a morale call was.
Okay. So maybe coming home from any of your deployments, how were you welcomed home from them? By family and friends, or?
Yeah, family and friends. Every time I come back, first one time it was the last from Iraq. I mean, there's been many times come home, but from post 9/11 to Iraqi deployments were first one. Media, there was a little media there. A lot of base, wing commanders, squadron commanders, supervisors, things of that nature. We went over with 13 people the first time, but I think 8 of them came back the day before we came back. We were stuck in Qatar, and we sent all the junior enlisted home. If you were basically E5 and below, we sent them home a day before, because it's just military transport's not the best. So we got all the younger guys home first, and then four or five of us stayed back. The E7s, anybody pretty much above E6 and above, we all stayed, and we had to wait and fight for way back. I think there was 5 of us who made us back. So, but they all came out. There was a lot of people come out and saw us, just mainly family members. So, but that was Dayton Airport. And then 2011 I came home, it was in Columbus, and that's just mainly, we actually requested not to have anybody, media, nothing. We don't like any of that, or I didn't personally, at the time, so.
Okay. So you get back from your last deployment, then how much longer did you have in?
I got back August, I retired in October.
Oh, okay, so not long at all.
Well, the following year. But,
Oh, okay.
So I got back August, I was on terminal leave till like almost October, or not terminal, but I mean, I was on leave when I got back from Iraq from August till just about mid-October. I was out for about 40 days before I came back. So maybe it was late September. But regardless of that, I came back. I was the operations superintendent for my organization, so I stayed from from about October of 11 till actually July 12th, 2012 was my last day in uniform, because I went on terminal leave at that point, had enough, like 50 some days or 60, I don't know how many days left, plus they give you permissive TDY for, separation time and all that kind of stuff, but essentially my last day at work was July 12th, 2012. So.
Okay. Yeah. So why did you choose to get out? Did you retire out?
I did retire.
Okay. Why did you choose?
I had a lot of physical issues.
Okay. Were you medically?
No,
retired?
That's what I was avoiding.
Okay.
So I had some damage to my shoulders, like I said, my first deployment. Technically, my second deployment, I probably shouldn't have went, but because I had a pretty tore up ankle. I had my ankle reconstructed, pretty in-depth surgery, actually by Wright State Orthopedic Clinic here at Miami Valley Hospital. But had a pretty bad ankle. My shoulders I've had knee surgeries, but at the time I didn't want to give it up. I felt, I knew we were taking 45 people. We were deploying from just my organization alone. We had 45 people going, and I led the team. I was the lead NCO they had a major and an officer go too, but I was the highest in ranking enlisted going. And but I just wanted to go again to make, I had a lot of experience, and I just wanted to make sure I took the guys, went, I don't know, it's weird and it's hard to explain, but I just wanted to go, to make a difference and be there for everybody else, all the guys that work for me. So, and plus all the other people, friends obviously I made, hundreds and hundreds of people that becomes friends with every time you deploy. So, but that's why. But when I got back, I was tired, sore. I was, physically couldn't maintain it was harder to run, harder to do my push-ups, harder to do my sit-ups, and just, I did not want to get to a point where I became a burden to the organization. So it was time for me to go. So I just decided to go.
Okay. Do you remember the day you got out? You know the date, correct?
Yep, July 12th. That was my last day in uniform. Effectively, 1 October 2012 was when I retired. That's my official retirement date. So, but I had August and September of terminal leave and permissive TDY and stuff like that. So.
Okay. Do you remember that day at all? Your last day in uniform?
I do.
Is it special in any way, or?
Kind of. I didn't want a lot of, because you're close with people. I just didn't want, too much. I even told everybody always makes come to work their last day, they want to do something different, or they want to make a strong, statement when they leave. We had guys that wanted to ride horses, ride a horse off base when they left, or, do something different. And I thought about it, and I didn't want to I didn't want it to be any different than any other day. I came to work, checked my email, because I'd already cleaned my office out pretty good and loaded everything up. I remember coming in, I cleaned off, I burned a CD with a bunch of last minute stuff that I had, emails, walked around. I did post checks that day because I was superintendent still, so I did post checks, went out, checked the guys working the gate, some of the patrols. I rode around on one of the patrols just checking the base. Stopped in, saw a few people, said goodbye, walked around the squadron, told everybody I was leaving, because I didn't want it to be any different, even though it was my last day. So, and I just left like I normally would. So that was it.
Okay. So I know it's only been a few years, not even 3 years yet.
3 years in July, yeah.
Yeah. So what have you done since then, though?
Well, July 12th I left. July 19th I started the current job I'm at now with Cornerstone Research Group.
Okay. And what do you do there?
Well, I first started out as a facility security officer, working different projects, mainly just doing personnel security, physical security, different types of things like that, some project management. And then within a year or so, that I made it to director. So I became a director, managing some program management, doing some business development stuff, and also still supervising the security section. We have different security people at a reception desk as well. I took over that, supervising the receptions and things. And then 1 October of last year, I was promoted to vice president. So I'm now a vice president with the Organization for Security and other things. I do quite a bit of different things for the company now. So
Is that out of Wright Pat?
it's not out of Wright Pat. It's over in Beaver Creek. It's over by Indian Ripple Road.
Oh, okay.
So, but we have some subsidiary companies that work. We do R&D for everybody, you know. So
Okay. So was that transition difficult for you at all out of the military?
at first it was, but the transition was better than what I expected, because I discovered that being a veteran at the time, I never knew what I had until I was one of the few, I think, maybe that made the aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize until you get out the skill sets that I learned in the military,
Mm-hmm.
the discipline, the communication skills, the writing, all the things I used to fight and argue with and get upset about that I had to do.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know how much of a resource it would be on the outside. So I consider myself an undereducated overachiever, you know, from the military, and to transition that skill set and to find that the companies want you and need that, but they don't know it. That's another thing too. Being a veteran is some companies don't know they need a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my opinion, but
Yeah.
but I found it huge. I mean, I walked through the door and I'm like, oh, that's simple, blah blah blah. And they're like, oh, how'd you do that? You know, I'm like, oh, that's simple. You know, that's
Mm-hmm.
something I did day to day, doing, you know, superintendent of an organization. You know, controlling, you know, scheduling, manpower, people, leave, vacation, civilian workforce, reserve workforce, you know, all the different things, training, allocation, you know, things that I managed and did as a superintendent in the military, you know, came into play when I started as an organization. Just simple stuff to me, but I had to learn in the military, and I just built that toolbox, got that skill set, and didn't even realize that when I walked out the doors that I would open it up and use it again, but in a different fashion. So.
Okay. So how was you know, maybe your experience in the military, your experience overseas, you know, how has that affected your life?
Lots of ways.
Maybe give me like 3 ways that you can pinpoint.
3 ways. Number one, taught me to be a better father.
Mm-hmm.
I realized, you know, 15 years into my military career, that I was a better father to, you know, 100, you know, 18 to 20 somethings than I was my own children. So I had to learn how to that showed me, you know, I'm like, holy crap. So taught me to be a better father. So, you know, yeah, granted my kids were, you know, young teenagers at the time, which they're all, you know, young adults in their 20s now, but taught me to be a better father. Taught me a lot of compassion and grace, dealing with the circumstances of being gone, understanding, you know, anytime I deployed, yeah, even though I was being, you know, subjected to things that were harmful at times or possibility, you know, you always can't forget that the family at home is sometimes going through things just as much, you know, sometimes harder, you know, because the spouses are the ones that really go through a lot. They're alone taking care of family members, kids, children, and you're deployed and you have all your buddies, your pals, you know, you have a support structure when you're deployed. So, but then the third thing is stress management. That's the one thing I learned too, or the third thing, I guess, dealing with stressful situations and, you know, staying level-headed and understanding the fact that emotions cannot be changed by a physical act. So you just got to learn how to be level-headed and address things and press on.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. I think So obviously you learned a few things from the military. What's your, like, maybe not philosophical, but what's your kind of view on the military and war in general now that you've been a part of it for so long?
Well, first of all, I think it is a great career. Number one, I'm kind of torn. I used to think years ago. I used to think everybody should go to the military. But the older I got, and we started realizing it's not for everybody. Granted, it's a great opportunity to give someone, to provide them, if they choose to accept it. The lifestyle, the education, the benefits, the camaraderie, the spirit of corps, everything behind it. If you accept it and move on with it, it's a great career. But to look back on it, it was the greatest thing I think I could ever done. If I would have done it again, I'd do the same thing I did.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it. And well, I shouldn't say I wouldn't change a thing. Probably would have got commissioned earlier, went and maybe become an officer, because those officers typically had a little better life and financially rewarding, a little bit better. But I'm not regretful of anything I've done in my career, not at all. I mean, everything happened for a reason, and but it's just the mindset that what it gives, and to me, and I call it old school, call it whatever, but I was consider myself patriotic. I'm not the old, what I call the new Whiffam generation, what's in it for me generation. A lot of people have that, what's in it for me, but I did it because I wanted to serve my country and things of that nature. And then, but I also made a great living and developed me as a person, as a senior NCO, and I retired, and I call it graduating from life, went on to my new life, but it made me the person that I am. Very proud of what I did, and so I would always do it, same thing again. So I would recommend to anybody at least try it, but like I said, it's not for everybody.
Okay, is there any message you wanted to leave for anybody who may view this?
As in who?
Well, it's gonna be in the Library of Congress. It'll be archived, so you never know who will be looking at it. But
just that we can't forget, obviously, what veterans do for this country. That's the biggest thing. I know I'm not the type that I don't want recognition. I don't want praise. I'm not those guys. I feel very humbled and embarrassed at times when I used to walk around in my uniform. People always want to thank you, and I get it, but at the time too, it was kind of humbling. It was like, it's kind of weird and awkward. I didn't want that. What I want is people to appreciate it, not think us, but appreciate it by paying it forward, by doing the right thing, by maintaining patriotic, by doing the right thing for our country, doing what's, like I said, what's right and what's right in different people, but just make the United States what it is, what it always has been, and I think a lot of it lays on the backs of the veterans and blood that a lot of them spilled. So never forget what they've done and what we're going to continue to do.
Okay. So
that's the biggest thing.
Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to bring up at all?
Not that I can think of. Like I said, it's so hard to say. Fit 24 years, 8 months, and so many days into a short interview. But it's been challenging and interesting to all over from both stateside deployments. I've done a lot of things stateside that I never thought I would work for NORAD and do anti-terrorism stuff, and just it's unbelievable what the military given me. So it's been a great career. So
okay. Well, thank you for doing the interview, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.